Welcome to this episode of Pen to Paper Press podcast. I'm Cindy Kochis. I enjoy talking with best-selling authors, writers, editors, publishers, and the creative souls about the process of developing our stories to completing our works of art. Each episode is an opportunity for us to explore mindsets, pearls of wisdom, and the experiences that began our journey as an author from the moment we put pen to paper. Sandra Cooze is an intuitive trauma release and self-empowerment coach, Reiki master and teacher, certified traumatic incident reduction facilitator, and a published author. In March of this year, she published Journey to Yourself, How to Heal from Trauma, written by someone who did. This is the first book in the series she is writing. Welcome, and thank you for joining me in the Pen to Paper Press podcast studio.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I'm so happy to be here.
You are welcome. Thank you. And I would love to learn more about the series that you are writing. And what can you share with us about the series?
Okay, the series is called Journey to Yourself. And it's a series of 3 books. The first one that has been published this year is How to Heal from Trauma. The second one is How to Unbecome Who You Were Taught to Be. And the last book is going to be How to Find Your True Self.
Wow, powerful.
Thank you.
And writing books on our past traumas is not easy. It's not easy at all. Anybody who has written a memoir can definitely, agree to that. Because it's so easy for us to slip back into that, emotional hell of that time period. Mm-hmm. So what self-care techniques did you gift yourself when you were writing through those moments when, those painful events and probably going through lots of tissues?
Yeah, well, I have to say, when I wrote my book and started with my story, I had already healed from everything. So it was not as hard as it would have been if I was still in the healing process. But it was difficult still for me, to really purposefully go back into every incident, and there were many in my life. And so it really had to take a step back and take a deep breath and allow myself to feel what I was feeling. That was the one thing that I've learned, is that we have to allow ourselves to feel.
Agreed. Because if we stifle it, that's when we come into more resistance to do things. That kind of becomes a fear freeze thing where we just pulled back ourselves from, experiencing life.
Yeah, that's very true.
And so for you, with writing your first book, do you mind telling us a little bit about your first book?
Of course. Of course, I want to talk about it.
Please and thank you. Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to come up with the right words to say, tell me about it, because without saying, give me the juicy dirt on it, because that's not what I want. What right. I'm looking for is writing about painful things, and finding ourselves, the journey to self, period. Yeah. Is not an easy journey.
No.
And so
it's not supposed to be.
No. Well, it'd be nice. It would be nice if it was, but yeah, you're right. So now I lost my question about, tell me about the, some of the things that you did for yourself how did you do it and remain gentle on yourself?
Well, first of all, writing a book about your story is a journey. There's a reason why there are several drafts, especially when you write your own story, because the very first time you write out your story, it's raw. It's very angry. It's we want to go to our attackers and bite their head off while we're writing this.
Yes.
I know I was. And then I had to put it aside for a while. There were different things that happened in my life. So from different men at different times in my life. And I had to start somewhere where I felt comfortable starting. So not at the very beginning or at the very end. Where I felt comfortable is where I started and worked my way up or down the timeline. And that was very helpful for me because it gave me time to really adjust to really going back into the story. And I tried to be as truthful as possible because with my book, yes, I want to show people how they can heal from trauma, but I also want to show them how I write my story, that I've done this. That I'm not just saying empty words. No, I've been through my story, I've healed, and you can tell from the way the final draft of my story is in a book, that I wrote it with compassion for myself, with understanding for my parents who did the best they could with what they had. And even though it would have been a lot more than I would have needed from them, but they did the best they could. So I try to show people, yes, I healed. Yes, I understand my parents' place in all of this, and it's okay.
I like how you said the first draft is full of anger.
Yes.
Because especially if you were the victim of something that you truly could not have prevented. Right. And in many cases, that is what happens with trauma, mm-hmm. and why it affects us the way it does. And there's, of course, different levels. So without going into too much detail, if you don't want to, what are some of the traumas that you speak of in your book?
Okay, well, it starts with when I was molested at 12, sexually harassed when I was 14, bullied from 16 to 17, then sexually assaulted multiple times between the age of 19 and 25, and raped when I was 22. So there's
a lot of reason to be angry.
Yes, there is.
To be angry. And through all of that, healing yourself was not an easy task. How did you get through that? How did you find that healing?
Well, it was actually a very spiritual experience.
Okay.
I had, after a couple of years after I was raped, I went to see a psychologist because I needed help, and I knew I needed help. But at the end of our first session, he dismissed me with the words that, I think you already worked through it all. What am I supposed to do?
Really?
Yes, really.
Okay, that's so interesting.
It was, yes. It was not what I expected, but in the end, it was the greatest gift he could have given me. Okay. But I have not seen this until I was healed.
Yes.
You know?
Okay.
So, because then after that visit, I had hit rock bottom. That was it. I was like, I reached out for help, and he says, I don't need help. So what now? And then a friend of mine came to visit, and he was very spiritual, and he stood in front of me, hands on his hips, looking at me with a stern face, and said, get a quartz crystal already. As if I was supposed to know what that meant. I had absolutely no idea. But this is it. I still have it from all those years ago. And this was the beginning of my healing journey and my introduction to spirituality. Now, this doesn't mean that my journey was all spiritual. No, but it showed me a path for healing, for possibilities I didn't see before. And that's what's happening when we hit rock bottom. When we stop only seeing what's inside this box that we call our life, when we start to look left and right what's outside.
Yeah.
And that's usually where we find the answers.
I hear you on that one. I so very resonate with that. And I like how you said, see the possibilities.
Yeah.
Because when we're in it and we're, when I hit that rock bottom, I find myself, I just visually see myself sitting on the ground, my back up against the signpost, and I'm sitting at the corner of what the F and what's the point. And that's when I just sit there and allow myself to be there until I'm ready to get up and do something about it. And in that case, that's when you see the possibilities and see, okay, how can I turn this awareness into something that'll help move me on the journey and get me to a better place, so that it's not so difficult, because we don't want, well, let me rephrase. Most people don't want to sit and remain in that space of, disparity and that rock bottom. There are a few, I do know a couple who reside there, but it's a choice, when we really stop and think about it. So now that you have one book written in the series, and you learned an ungodly amount of lessons from doing it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Is your second book easier, or is it a little bit more difficult to write the second book?
Well, both.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is, when I first started to write How to Heal from Trauma, I wanted to pack everything into this book. And I thought, okay, but Journey to Yourself, that was the actual title of the book, Journey to Yourself, and nothing else.
Okay.
But I was like, the journey is not just the trauma healing. The journey is so much more. And I was like, if I put all of this in one book, I have like 1,000-page book here. And I was like, I can't do this. And so I thought, okay, let's put it into a trilogy. After I published my first book and started writing a second one, I thought, what on earth was I thinking? Because I now put it really into step-by-step instructions.
Okay.
First, of how to heal from trauma. So my story is maybe 10 pages of the whole book.
Okay.
The rest is demystifying trauma. What's really happening when we feel this? What's really happening when we feel that? What is keeping us stuck? How can we forgive our attacker and ourselves? How can we find peace? How can we outgrow our trauma and find ourselves again? Including exercises and journaling prompts. Thank you. And room for notes. I'm perfectionist. Like every trauma survivor on this planet. We're all perfectionists, because when you're being traumatized, the first thing you lose is the sense of being in control.
Right.
And so we're masking this loss of control with perfectionism by trying to control everything. That's why so many trauma survivors have OCD. They just need to be in control to feel something resembling safety.
Wow.
Which is also in my book.
You really hit on something, because, I have several friends that have significant OCD, and it's like, I know a couple of those individuals, I know the trauma they went through, and it's like, wow, that really just, opened up that perception of that explains it. And interesting. I did not mean to cut you off.
No. I love those aha moments. It means I did the right thing with writing my book. When you already get one, you haven't even read it. So this series is going to be very, very powerful. And since you've published the first one in March, are you getting lots of response back from people going, oh my gosh, I needed this? I wish.
Oh no.
No, I think I went with the wrong publisher actually, because I'm so tight in what I can do and promoting and things. So I just took a peek on Amazon today and my book is on a bestseller list of 1,500,000. And I was like, this can't be happening. But it is what it is. At some point, someone is going to pick it up and says, wow, this is awesome. The world has to see it. But I guess the time is not yet.
So did you go with, so then you did not self-publish it. Did you go with like a hybrid publishing
Yes.
then? Okay.
Yes, I went with a hybrid because one of my friends, she has 7 books published with them and she was happy. And I was like, okay. And it sounded good. And yes, they're very nice people. And I get a lot of perks from that. But when it comes to really tweaking on Amazon and things like that, I have no control over that. And I think now that I've published my book, I see how important it is that I have the power to change the things I need to change, which means my next book, yeah, is going to be self-published. The next book in the series.
You know, we learn.
Yes.
There are no mistakes. It's all a learning process.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's always adjustments to be made. That is probably one of the hardest things that I have really became familiar with the true meaning of that, of adjusting. You know, there for a while it was I'm adjusting my sails and getting through the moment and so forth. And I just have a sense that someone is going to find that book and is going to really grab a hold of it. And you know, the trusting issue is another thing. Trusting in, and I mean trusting in like the divine and trusting in timing in all of that. There's a reason there's a pause in the popularity, or you know, the in the lower readership. There's a reason for that. What the reason is, I can't tell you. I don't have that insight, or at least not right now. And if I do, Sandra, I will send that away to you. But you know, with this, you're learning that how do I get more eyes on my book cover? How do I get this into more hands so that people can heal from it? And what I'm really hoping is that someone in the audience is going, you know, this is a topic that I need to learn more about, and picks it up and says, ooh, I need to share this. So that's the intention I'm setting out there for you, that we get you noticed.
Thank you. No, I have the strong belief that anybody who needs my book will find it.
Yes.
And I know this to be true because I'm just as spiritual. I mean, of course, my spiritual journey. So, but still, the ego sometimes gets frustrated. Let's put it this way.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the ego wants to say, yeah, I told you so. And, you know, well, all the different mean, horrible things that we say to ourselves. And then when you sit back and it's like, take a deep breath, and it's like, that's not true. Timing is everything. And the right person who this is intended for will find it. And in the meantime, you keep going forward, you keep promoting it, you keep getting yourself out there and making it known. And with your next book, think of all the lessons that you have now that you didn't have earlier this year. So, one of the things that I did want to, you know, I keep talking about the trauma part, and maybe this isn't the right time to ask that question that I was just going to ask. Let's talk about your writing process, because that's important too. So are you like working on this book night and day? Are you hit and miss on, like one day you'll write 5 words, the next week you might add another word, and then 3 months later write a paragraph?
Well, I mean, the last year it has been pretty difficult with my husband now working from home. My son was on virtual school from home, and I had to become the strict housewife and mom, and had to redefine my role in this world. I mean, running my own business when the whole family is home and I have to be there because they expect that from me,
Yes.
because it's always been like this. Then yeah, I had to define my role. So my role as a writer was put on the back burner.
Mm-hmm.
But now that my son is back in real school, I have a little more time. My husband is still home, working from home, but still he can make his own lunch. So
yes.
And when I write, I have to be in the flow. I can't just sit down in the morning. Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Let's write. It doesn't work like this. First, I need to know that my kitchen is clean. I cannot work when I know the kitchen isn't clean. I don't know why that is, because I'm in my office. I don't see the kitchen, but it's always in the back of my mind. But I need to know my house is in good shape, so I don't have to worry about it. And then when this is done, I can sit down. And then, of course, I need to be inspired. So I don't write a book from start to finish. Just like with my story, I write what I feel drawn to writing.
Okay.
So the second book, for example, is about unbecoming who we were taught to be. So everything we were taught from childhood, growing up, all those limiting beliefs that our parents, grandparents instilled with us, what they grew up with, and bullying in school, then the workplace, everything we had to be. And that's not us because it doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of, I wouldn't say trauma, but issues that I cover. So basically unraveling everything that we're not and making people think. But to really inspire them to think, I have to inspire to write about the subject.
Right.
So it's not like a manual that I'm writing. For me, it has to come from the heart. Because unless it's from the heart, it's really coming from the center of my being. It's not authentic me. And even if you read my first book, every chapter, you will know this is authentic me. This is no jargon, just written down pretty quick to get it done. No, this is all me.
Well, and there you bring up something that's so important, because what I've noticed is some people are just writing to write it, to say that they're a published author. And you can tell when they're writing for SEO, so that they'll get the high rankings on internet searches or Amazon or whoever. And in many cases, those books are missing exactly what you said. They're missing the heart. They're missing the depth of the intention of the book, which, when you're working on for the intent to make a buck, with the intention to get the high rankings on search engines and so on and so forth, that doesn't come from the heart. And there's so many people I know are talking about, and with you being a Reiki master and being spiritually connected, I know you're feeling it too. There's a huge energy shift right now that's happening, and people are really becoming aware of, whoa, wait a minute. I don't want to be sold on this. I don't want to be sold on something that's not going to touch me in that way that feels good, that helps me and helps me to connect with another person. And so when you write from the heart, you feel that from, how many books have you written where you're like, okay, they're looking for a quick buck. You know?
Yeah.
And when we write from the heart, it's like you become so attached to the content that you feel it, you're a part of it, you're living in it, and you're taking the lessons from it.
Mm-hmm.
And with having, I'm not exactly positive what a traumatic incident reduction facilitator is, or what I have a good idea what your role is, but I'm sure that with your knowledge, you're able to help people through your words, because again, it's coming from your heart, to really understand where they're at and bring that awareness up to the forefront that makes them stop and think and go, oh, okay, that explains that.
Mm-hmm.
How do I move forward from here? Oh, look, here's an idea. I'll try that.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I want to try and accomplish with my book. Because there's enough books out there that just talk about the subject.
Yes.
But they don't tell you how you get through this. They don't tell you what you can do to heal yourself. I healed myself. So yes, I help others heal too, but I healed myself, so you can too. I'm no different than anybody else.
We are so similar in so many ways, and people forget that. And I think that's part of that energetic shift that we're going from the me to, oh wait, I'm similar to them. They do this very similar. Oh wait, we're coming more back into more of a we or community type, hey, let's help out our neighbor. They need help down the road. So-and-so had such and such happen. I need to go help them. I think that sense of community is coming back, or at least I'm hoping it is, but that's what I'm feeling as well. So, which is very important. Who inspired you, or what really kind of inspired you to, you got all this information, you've had the idea to maybe not write a book. What was the catalyst that said, I'm doing it?
Well, I always wanted to write a book. I love writing. When I was 14, I used to write poetry. And yeah, but if you had told me like 5 years ago I would write a book about trauma healing, I would have laughed. I thought I would write a cheesy romance novel or something like that. But yeah, one thing that I really loved was when I gave Reiki sessions. Afterwards, we're always sitting down, me with my clients, and to make sure they're okay after the session, not ungrounded or dizzy or anything. Right. And they always talked to me. And trauma always came up. They just felt, relaxed enough to open and talk about it. And I just always knew what they needed to hear, to understand, to have that shift, to let it go and heal. Yeah. And I just loved this part so much. And then, of course, there was always this question, well, who am I to write a book? Who am I to write a book? The usual. But then I came across a quote from Oprah. And she said, turn your wounds into wisdom. And that hit home. That was that tipping point when I said, okay, yep, she has a point. Because what we forget is that our stories matter. With our stories, we can help people. We can show them, I was in the same boat and I made it through, and so can you.
Yep. And
because we don't think our stories are important, because we are not allowed to talk about it, because what would the neighbors think if they knew? At least I was brought up like this.
Most people are.
Yeah, probably. So until we realize, no, this is my story, and my story is important. My story has we have to give our stories a purpose, because once we give it a purpose, we take our power back. So it's not just helpful for others, it's so empowering for ourselves. I can tell you the first time I was on stage, a little stage at a little event, and shared a little bit of my story, and I was terrified. I was like, what will people say? I mean, I was bullied in school, so I was afraid this would be the same thing here, being laughed at or something, but no. They came to me with tears in their eyes, thanking me for sharing my story because it was so inspiring. And they said, I've been through this too, and I never had the strength to talk about it. I was like, I was strong. I was terrified. I wasn't strong. But, so in this moment of bravery to just go up on stage in front of the microphone and just talk about it changed everything.
Well, shame, guilt, fear, they're oftentimes that roadblock that prevents us from talking about what happened to us, and much less writing about it. What are some of the insights you would offer to those that are sitting on that fence post, to help them overcome their fears to express themselves through creativity, and not necessarily through writing, but creativity in general?
Well, it's a very good question. For the most part, we are afraid because we don't deem ourselves worthy. Because for most of our lives, we have been conditioned to believing that we are no one important.
Yeah. Because
of the fear of our parents, grandparents, because they were taught, don't hold your head high, but don't speak up. You don't want to make yourself better than anybody else because self-pride stinks.
Yes.
That's what I was brought up with. Germany, after the war. So, yeah. And so understanding that it's their belief, but not ours. Because deep down, we know this is wrong. We know this is not us. So we're basically paralyzed, like almost held hostage by the fears of our ancestors. So, and understanding that and taking the first step out of this prison is terrifying. Believe me, I've stepped out of this so many times, and every time I'm terrified. But once we do that, we see nothing happened. We didn't get killed, like what our ego tried to tell us. Yes, ego is funny. But on the other hand, we saw how strong we actually are. So sometimes we have to challenge, not sometimes, every time we have to challenge ourselves. The very first time, it's extremely difficult because we're really terrified of what other people think. Will they pull us back down? What if we stand our ground? What will they say? How will they treat us? Will people like what we do? Will they laugh at us? But all these are just fears of stopping us from moving forward.
Yeah.
Just trying, just once, trying.
Just picking up the pen and putting it to the paper. And if you don't have the words, then draw, just to do something that kind of helps to express it somehow outside of yourself, moving it through your head to your heart to your hand, or from your head to your hands, and just express it. And then again, it can be creativity is anything that is an expression.
Yes.
That comes out of us. So
usually when I stand in front of an opportunity that terrifies me because it's next level, I always ask myself, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? The very worst thing that can happen. What is that? Let's say we want to share our story in a podcast for the very first time. Remember the very first time I was on the radio? Oh my God, I had my crystals left and right in my hand, and I was like so anxious. And after that, I was like, I just had a conversation with someone else, like I do with you right now. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking of those million of people that could possibly listen and judge me. That's what I was thinking about. But in the end, it was just a conversation between you and me.
Right.
And it's a wonderful conversation. I mean, so we always have to ask ourselves, what's the worst thing that can happen? And the very worst thing that we can come up with is never going to happen. That's just our mind trying to stop us. So we have to challenge ourselves and say, okay, I am scared shitless, but I'm going to do it anyways. Yeah. And if we say, I'm going to do it anyways, it's amazing what we can accomplish. I wouldn't be here today talking to you about my very first published book if I hadn't pushed myself over the edge time and time and time again. I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah. Very true. Because reaching out to, the hybrid publisher that you're working with, that takes courage.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting your vulnerable self out there. I have this baby. I have this, I have to protect my baby. And if you don't like my baby, then, that triggers all sorts of emotions. In handing that off to somebody else to critique. And, one of the harder things about writing a book is having somebody edit that book, because it's like, what do you mean my words weren't perfect?
Yes. I know. I actually hired someone to edit. She's a book coach. And yeah, when she first said, okay, here's some of my changes, and everything was red, I was being triggered. I was like, are you kidding me? But yeah, like I said, it's my baby. But then she helped me make my book sound even better than it did before.
Yes.
I'm originally from Germany. English is my second language. Our commas we put differently than you do. So she had a lot of work along with the commas. But she changed some words and said, okay, rethink this and rethink that, and taking a couple of days to really stop fuming. And I sat down and looked at it. I was like, yeah, she's right. And it really made the book more sounded better than it already did from what I thought it did. But
you brought up something that's so important, and that's that second language. And that is a hurdle that you have to really sit back and who is your target audience? Which country are they in? Which language are you writing to? I helped a gal with editing her book. I helped her get through her process and coached her through a few things. And she's from Canada. And Canada does do things a little different in regards to their writing style. And it was like, okay, which audience are you more wanting to attract? And so then both of us adjusted to that particular audience that she was working, or that she was writing for. And that is something to take into consideration. It's like, and when I spoke with Richard Litton a couple of episodes back, he's got his book in several languages. So then, when it came to, and he talks about being on Amazon, and for this country, you have to categorize everything different than if you're in this country, because things are interpreted differently between the different countries and the different languages. And words have different meanings in different places. So yes, you had quite the challenge. So, yeah, that would pose quite the challenge. But again, going back to the whole courage and empowering yourself to do this, stepping outside of our comfort zone is not fun, but we can make it fun.
Mm-hmm. Plus, the thing is, the first time we step out of our comfort zone is the most terrifying.
Yes.
But the more often we do that, the more amazing it becomes, because the more often we step out of our comfort zone, the faster is the growth.
Yes.
So, and now at the beginning, when I was stepping out of my comfort zone, it was hell. But now when I have a challenge, I just say, bring it on. Let's do this. Let's get this done, because I know the outcome is going to be amazing, because it has been so far. But we have to get to this point where we're over the edge and go down on the other side. Once we reach that, it's getting easier, but we have to challenge ourselves again and again.
Yes.
Just go for it. And it gets easier every time.
To become a podcast guest, I ask writers to fill out an application and submit that application. And one of the things that I ask is what are 3 questions you'd like to be asked? Of course, I morph it into the conversation and things that I find, or my intuition. And the other thing that I ask is, why would you like to be interviewed? And you wrote, we all have a story, our stories. Stories change lives. Stories raise awareness. Stories empower. Talking about the dark times of our lives can be intimidating, to say the least. It is easier to believe that our stories don't matter than rise up and bring awareness to it. I want to show people the other side. I want to show them how empowering and liberating it is to no longer be silenced, but find our voice and talk about what happened to us. Fear is powerful emotion that can paralyze us, but understanding that our story has meaning and needs to be told is the greatest gift we can give ourselves and the ones who need to hear it. And I have to tell you, when I read that, I was like, yep, you're in. I'm a
writer. I can't help it.
But I love that. And again, that we have been going, if you were to kind of pick out that overall message in this podcast, that's it. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to write about it. It's okay to be uncomfortable. And it's okay to, have those fears and feel that shame and let the guilt of things, reside in us for a little bit, but sweep it to the side and say, excuse me, I'm going this way.
Mm-hmm.
And that has truly been the undertone of this whole entire conversation, is our stories changes, they changed lives, because what we're doing by sharing them is reaching back to the person who's 2 steps behind us and going, here, let me give you my hand. I'll help you along. Is there any greater gift that we can give somebody else?
No, there isn't.
Because we're giving it from our heart. And again, we're not reaching back to somebody saying, by the way, I'm going to sell you this because I want, I'm banking on SEO ratings. So, and if that person does turn around and says that to you, you're like, yeah, no, hands up, you're walking away. Go away now, go away.
Exactly.
The person who reaches back and with all the compassion and understanding and says, let me help you. And truly, that is what I'm getting from your books. and in speaking with you and so forth, and in the I have to say, I have to mention this because in our pre-interview conversation, you and I giggled so much about war paint. And what do I mean by war paint? Makeup.
Yeah.
Because I do the podcast as an audio, and yeah, down the road I could, publish part of this as with the visual. And it was so funny because I did put on the mascara thinking, yeah, I want to put a little bit of my war paint on.
Yes, that was a wonderful pre-interview.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because we found that we have so many things that are very, very similar. And again, that's that whole understanding of that we have so many more similarities than differences. We really do. And if people, just step back out of the me focus, they when they do take that step back, they see that, oh wow, I recognize that aspect. Ooh, yeah, I know that one too. I need to work on that one. They got that aspect. I have it too, but yeah, I need to work on that one too.
Yep, that's where the jealousy part comes in.
Oh,
which is also in my book, Understanding Jealousy.
Is it? That must have been well, no, I'm not going to assume. I'm going to ask you, was that a more challenging element to write about, jealousy?
Well, it wasn't that challenging to write about, but once I went through my own situation of jealousy and judgment and understood why I did that, to process that took a while.
Yes.
So, but yeah, no. Everything that I'm writing about in my book, I've already been through. So I didn't write about anything I didn't understand.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it's pretty interesting when you really go into the matter of things, like really try and analyze it to little pieces, how much knowledge you get.
Yes.
From how we react, why we behave the way we do. And understanding that really opens up all the compassion to someone else who isn't as far as we are. That really helps you to reach back because, yes, a lot of people are self-focused. Like, hey, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
That's what most people are focusing on, but we're taught to do this.
Yes.
So, and unlearn that is a journey in itself. But the more you unlearn that, the more you open up to compassion and embracing others for their differences, understanding why they behave the way they do, and acknowledge that, respect that, and say, yeah, I know, I've been there. I understand it. So now this doesn't upset me anymore because I understand it.
Yes.
And this is the best gift we can give ourselves and others, because they're struggling with something we have already been through. But by understanding and seeing the signs of it, we can say, here, let me explain to you what is going on right now. Like with the OCD. I actually had a client who didn't understand why she had so much OCD. She didn't understand why the chair had to be in exactly this spot. Okay. Now, her story is in my book, so I'm allowed to talk about it. And it was that her mother was murdered by her boyfriend. And she could never understand why. And they could never find any proof to get him in jail. They just assumed because he was a very abusive man, from what she told me. So, and he was like, everything has to be in its place. And when my kids play in the yard and they're done, I have to clean up everything right away. I can't just stand there and do nothing. And I explained to her, it's because it makes sense. Because for you, you need this control. You need to know the chair is exactly where it is, where it always is, because this makes sense. But your mother's murder doesn't make sense.
No.
So you're trying to find ways to make sense. And that's the OCD. You can't comprehend what happened and you couldn't find closure. So it's that perfectionism again. The need to control because she feels so powerless.
Yeah.
I explained that to her and she said, you know what? I went to therapy for years and no one could explain that to me. So the next weekend, it was last summer, her kids were playing in the garden and left the toys out, and she was challenging herself. She was saying, nope, the toys can stay out there for a little while longer. Nothing's going to happen if they're out there.
Mm-hmm.
Even her husband came to her and asked if she was all right. So you see, she started to understand why she was doing that. Mm-hmm. And this gave her the closure she needed. And she started challenging herself and letting the toys there and easing up. And she started to notice when she was trying to control and took a step back. So she was rewiring her brain by herself to stop doing this. And this is amazing. Once people understand why they're doing something, they can change it. It's just a little piece of knowledge they need. Yeah. And this is what we can give them as people who have healed from that, people who understand it. This is so powerful. Mm-hmm. What's in it for me? I see the joy of the aha moment, this transformation happening in their eyes. That's what's in it for me. That's the best feeling I could ever ask for.
Yes.
That's what's in it for me. And this is all that I need.
Well, and it's very clear that your intention is to heal and to help others.
Yeah.
And, I picked that up immediately when you and I spoke on that pre-interview call, that you're not in this for the money. No. You're in this to help that person that's 2 steps behind and say, hey, I see you. I recognize you. I acknowledge you. And I'm telling you, you're worth it. Take my hand and let's go. And what a gift.
Yeah.
And being intuitive and so forth is a blessing in the things that you're doing, because you see things, you sense things. I won't say you see things, you sense things that, a therapist who works by the book, from the book, from the education, without, that doesn't use the intuitive side, you have that leg up, and in that ability to connect with them. And there is something to be said for that, because we all want to be acknowledged. Yeah. We all want to be heard. We want to be seen. Nobody enjoys that sense of alone. Yeah, there are times when we want to be alone and, just kind of sink into self and be with self. But that word alone and feeling alone and unwanted is not something people really want to experience. And so many of us find ourselves there from time to time. And in that time, we want to feel that somebody gives two shits about us. So, and your series is really going to make a difference. And I truly, truly wish you the best of luck on all of this. How can people find you on the internet?
Well, they can find me on my website, riseaboveyourstory.com.
Okay.
They can find me on LinkedIn under Sandra Cooze. On Facebook, I just started establishing a new Facebook page called Sandra the Trauma Whisperer. And they can reach me by email, Sandra@riseaboveyourstory.com. Yeah, and I think that's it. I'm on Instagram too, but hardly ever. So if you send me a message there, I won't get it until in a few months, maybe.
Isn't it funny? I'll talk to some people about social media, and some are like, oh yeah, and they rattle off 6 different applications that they're on, and then other people are like, yeah, I really don't use social media.
No, I wish I had a social media team that I wouldn't have to worry about it, because I like to be creative and not just trying to get myself out there and be known. I'd rather be creative and write or whatever I feel drawn to.
And it takes a lot of time. It really does take a lot of time to maintain all of that. And I'll have your website and your book on the show notes page. And Sandra, I have truly enjoyed our conversation. Obviously, you can tell by the expression on my face, I've had many aha moments.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, you are making a difference. And I always, when I was publishing my magazine, Elements for a Healthier Life, one of the comments that I always was sharing with the writers, because I did things a little different with the writers. I didn't give them an assignment. What I did was write from your heart. That was my only instruction. Write from your heart. And of course, that drove a couple of writers a little crazy. And I would say, okay, well, here's a topic. Start working on it, but follow your heart and let your heart lead the story. And 9 times out of 10, the topic that they wrote about was not that initial prompt. It was just a prompt to get them going. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I always shared with them is your story matters and your words have power. And when I sat down to start doing the podcast, it was like, what is the overall message I really, really want to get out there to people? And that is, your words have power. Your story matters. And somewhere along the line, I added, and keep your pen to paper or whatever. But it really is about expressing yourself through creativity. And it doesn't mean you have to express yourself through writing, whether it's writing a book, writing journal prompts, writing a letter that you either, file away, send, or burn, which I've done. It's about drawing. It's about painting. It's about making ceramics, anything that gets your story out and in some creative form, because it's that moves us out of our emotional state of stuck.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sandra, for joining me here in the Pen to Paper Press podcast studio.
Thank you so much, Cindy. It was a wonderful interview.
You are very welcome.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Before we end our time together, we'd like to say thank you for listening to my conversation with Sandra Cooze. To access her website and purchase the books she has written, visit pentopaperpress.com/podcast and select the show notes page for this episode. The intention of Pen to Paper Press podcast is to reinforce that our words have power and our stories matter. To share this important message, I created several mug designs for you to choose from with my artwork. These are perfect for enjoying your favorite beverages when listening to this podcast series. You will find an array of products available for purchase at pentopaperpress.com/store. To receive future episodes in your inbox, subscribe to the newsletter and subscribe on your favorite podcast application. You are invited to share your favorite episode on social media and with individuals who will resonate with this content. Take care, and until next time, keep your pen to paper and write. Your words have power. Your story matters. Bye for now.